I'm Adrian Kerr, and this is From the Top. I'm joined by Jon Modica. Jon, how are you today?
Good. How you doing?
How's Florida at the moment?
This is actually the first year in a few years that our seasons went back to normal. So Florida's been great. Florida's been, relatively windy. We've had a good winter, and so it's nice to be back here. I was gone. I left Florida for many years to work, school, grad school, and yeah. So last 5 years I've been back here now, and I honestly believe this is the first year I feel like the Florida's really back in its normal windy season. So it's nice to be here right now.
I guess the best way to start, Jon, is why don't you explain your role at Cabrinha?
Yeah, so my role is actually in the investment group that purchased Cabrinha. So I'm the chairman of that investment group. So I put together obviously the group, and I make sure that we're making strategic decisions on the other investments and other opportunities, and helping to support Cabrinha and making sure that they have the assets and staff needed to be successful.
Mate, how did your relationship start with Cabrinha? I believe you used to be a team rider, right? Back in the day.
Yeah, it was it goes so far back, and really I got introduced to the Cabrinha guys when my local kite shop, who I would be there every day after school hanging out. It was just 5 minutes down the road from my house. The owner, Jeremy Green, Jupiter Kiteboarding, he invited me to an event up in North Carolina. It was a hurricane relief kiteboarding contest that they had going on, and I was happy to go to anything kiteboarding. Then the answer was yes. So I drove up with him, and Kent, now the CEO of Cabrinha, and Todd Grayo, who is now the VP of Sales of Cabrinha. They were there, and I at the time, I don't even know what their roles were at the time. I think one was the maybe VP, and one was the sales rep. But they were really nice to me. I got to know them a little bit, and then over the next couple of years, I'd run into them at all the events, and eventually they started to want to work with me more and more. And we've been friends now it's been 20 years.
Now, you've been involved in Cabrinha's US distribution, as you said, for the last 20 years, along with Kent Marinkovic. Give us an overview of how things have changed and developed over the years.
Well, it's funny that a lot changed, but the people don't change. They're always been good people. They've always been friends of mine, whether I, was an active kiteboarder when I was in my teens, to later when I was in school and grad school, where, I wasn't really on the water as much, and we just were friends and stayed in touch. I actually did live with Todd, our VP of sales, when I transferred to University of Miami for a year in college, and he let me live with him for a bit there. Probably the biggest mistake of his life, but but yeah. So our relationship has been really the same for all this time. It's just the roles have, I guess, altered a little bit, but we've been really good friends for a long time. But I've worked with the distribution as, like you said, the team rider, but I also acted as a sales rep for a very short period of time in the summers. This is way a long time ago. And but yeah, I honestly, it's funny to think about it now, but for me, the relationship is just a personal one. These are friends and people I respect and trust, and to be able to morph that into a working relationship has been really great, because it's easy when you trust and you have a lot of respect for each other. Working together becomes really simple.
Yeah, I always felt like Cabrinha's strength was its distribution, right? It always had great distribution, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, and the distribution's driven by the people, right? They've been able to attract and retain the best sales rep, the best team riders, because of who they are, the individuals. And these are a lot of people that people haven't really got to know, that they're more behind the scenes. But everyone from warehousing staff to sales reps or even our logistics crew, they've been there for a long time, and these are great people that get on the water as often as they can. So it really isn't. It's corny to say, and everyone claims it, but it is. If there is a more family driven group, I would be very surprised.
This year you've really released a wave of new products. Of course, plenty of kite gear, but you've had a big investment into foiling and winging. Is that a part of the industry that you see that's going to really blow up?
Well, if you think about what foiling represents to kiteboarding, if you took any other industry and any other sport and you said, hey, let's use surfing, for example, right? If there was a way to get you a surfboard that got you on the water 3 or 4 times more often, how well would they sell? They would sell really,
Sure.
really well. Hydrofoils get people on the water at least 2 to 3 times more often. I mean, the amount of days you can get, 8 knots of wind, all of a sudden now you're having an amazing session. And so, hydrofoils to me represent hey, here's an opportunity to get people on the water more, loving this sport, dedicate them to the sport when, there's a lot of kiteboarders who live in light wind areas like in Florida that they'd love to kiteboard once or twice a week, but maybe it's not that consistent. But with foiling, you can kiteboard here 4 or 5 days a week, easy. So for me, I said this is a really critical area. The whole team supported it, and I obviously supported it. It wasn't really driven by me. It was the team, and I just agreed that this is a key area we want to focus on. And I felt like in the past, maybe we had room to grow with it. And, I think the outcome was fantastic. I'm absolutely in love with our new foil range. And we've got, some exciting new designs coming out in the near future.
But I mean, winging seems to be the new craze, right? I mean, I don't quite know where that sits in kiteboarding. Can you see that being a major player moving forward? I think it's going to, I personally feel it's going to probably take away from kite foiling a bit, and it's going to sort of develop its own side. Is that where you guys see the wing side going?
No, I see it a little differently. This is just my personal opinion. I see wing foiling as really, are there kiteboarders who are going to transition to wing foiling and leave kiteboarding? Yeah, but I think this is a pretty insignificant number. I think I already know of a few examples that have gotten into wing foiling and now have bridged into kiteboarding from that. So I think for every person we might lose to a wing foiling, like a committed wing foiler, I think we might gain back by people getting introduced to kiteboarding. Wing foiling at the end of the day is much more approachable than kite foiling. I was actually on the beach this summer testing some new prototype wings up in New York. And there was 4 or 5 kiteboarders out, and then there was me and one other team rider, Evan Nesh, winging. And I had a whole crew of people come over to me and ask me all about it. And I was like, don't you see these amazing kites? And these guys are doing they were decent riders. They were doing 15, 20 foot jumps and back rolls and stuff. And here's me and Evan, struggling on shore with a prototype. And I was like, what about this is more appealing to you? And I asked them, and they said, well, kiteboarding looks scary to me. Kiteboarding looks complicated. It looks messy. And they're right. It is. Kiteboarding is a more complex ecosystem of equipment. And so winging is just more approachable. So, and I think once people get into winging, kiteboarding will become oh, wow, now that I've got this down, what else can I do? And that's all these water sports are addictive because they're so versatile. You can morph from one thing to the next. And I think that's why I and many other people have really always loved the sport. You get bored on a twin tip, grab a surfboard. You get bored on a surfboard, grab a skimboard. You get bored on any of those, grab a foil. You get bored on the water, jump on the snow. This is the magic of kiteboarding in my mind.
I kind of see winging as a bridge between kiteboarding and windsurfing. It seems to be you got people on both sides who both wing, but they don't necessarily do each other's sports.
Definitely. I think for some people, that's exactly what it is. I think for some windsurfers who maybe are a little bit tired of their complex rigs and quite frankly, pretty expensive rigs. Well, windsurfing is not cheap. Wing foiling is definitively more affordable and more compact. You could definitely throw it in the back of a small car much easier than an entire windsurfing rig, especially a wind foiling rig. So I think for some windsurfers, this represents a nice bridge between the two. I think for surfers and other people who think both kiteboarding and wing foiling and windsurfing are too complex, this represents hey, this is my first wind-powered sport that isn't so complex. This is something I can get into. And I've had a few friends who, I've taught to kiteboard over the years who were surfers who just never got the bug, but they all of a sudden they want a wing foil. So I think the reason wing foiling has gotten the traction it's gotten is because it does represent something different for a lot of different people, but it's all exciting and new. So I think that's why it's had a bit of more explosive growth than really anyone thought it possibly would ever have.
I mean, you mentioned twin tips, surfboards, skimboards, foiling, winging. What's your favorite Cabrinha product when it comes to kite surfing and foil and the foil range?
For me, I hurt my ankle in 2005, 2006 pretty badly. And I started riding surfboards really early on, really before it, the only guys riding surfboards were hardcore wave guys in Maui and and things like that. And, if I was riding them in all over Florida because I couldn't ride foot straps for quite some time, the bad ankle. And so for me, I've really developed a love for even small. I would call myself a small wave surfer because, to be honest, the amount of days I get overhead high are pretty slim. So yeah, if I had to pick a rig right now, I mean, an 8-meter Cabrinha drifter and either our Cutlass. I really loved our 5.5. Cutlass is a great little fishy board. It's easy to ride, fast, loose. I mean, if I could ride that every day, I'd be a very happy person. But, the good thing about, the sport being so versatile is I don't have to just ride that every day. I've got so many other options. But if I had to pick one rig, which is hard for me, I love gear. Hence why I was excited to be a part of this. I'm definitely a gear whore. If you look in my garage, I'll send you a photo later if you want. It's a little embarrassing what's in there. I used to be proud of it. Now I'm sort of almost ashamed of how much stuff is in there. But and then for foiling, I absolutely love. We have we call it the X series, but it's really cross series wings, and we call it that very intentionally. That they were kind of designed as hey, what's going to work for multiple sports here, because people are not going to buy multiple hydrofoils for different sports, and we kept that in mind. The 1600 wing, I'm a bit of a medium bigger person. I don't really know what's considered big these days, but I'm about 80 kilograms. I'm doing the conversion for most
80 kg. 80 so kg. Like 180 pounds, 175 pounds, something like that, right?
Exactly. And so, for me, I need a bit of a bigger wing especially for small Florida conditions. But yeah, so I use the 70 centimeter mast and the 1600 wing, and I use it for kite foiling, wing foiling, and surfing. It's a really nice all arounder. And then if I travel somewhere, I'll bring something smaller. But typically, if I just have one rig in the car, it's my I have a smaller autopilot board with my 1600 X series, and then I'll throw in an 8-meter switchblade and a surfboard if the wind picks up.
You guys have recently acquired the global license to produce DaKine's wind and foil gear. How does DaKine align with Cabrinha?
Well, I mean, I think where it really obviously aligns in the industry is its position, right? Where it's born out of Maui, Hawaii, literally in the same cannery. They mean that. It was born literally in the same exact spot. It's actually kind of weird, the level of coincidence that two major brands in this industry came from just such a small location. And then obviously there's some other significant brands in the industry that have come from pretty much right down the street as well that you know about. But DaKine came up to us. We closed the deal last February. It was a year ago today. Actually, this is our 1-year anniversary today from closing the deal, which I just realized. That's why I might sound a little shocked about it. I just looked at the calendar, and then it was several months later that the news about DaKine potentially shutting down their wind sports category came about. And I talked to our CEO, Kent Marankovic, about it. And we all agreed this is something that if there's an opportunity to get involved with, it seems like it should be a perfect cultural fit in the eyes of the industry, but also in a product range. DaKine has some of the best accessories in the industry, and Cabrinha has incredible product range, but there's a few accessory categories like harnesses and other things that we have not had for many years now. Cabrinha actually had harnesses 12 plus years ago, but I think that's about 10 to 12 years ago it stopped making harnesses. So when you've got a top tier brand like DaKine all of a sudden available, filling product ranges that you don't have, I mean, how do you say no to that? That's sure. So yeah, we reached out immediately, started having negotiations, and it took a bit of time with COVID and all the things that we had going on. We couldn't just drop everything we were doing, but we were hugely passionate about saving that brand, and now here we are 6 months later, and we've got the licensing rights and everything set up, and I never expected how positive the public reaction that would have been. I mean, I got just as many emails about us taking on DaKine as I did Cabrinha, and certainly DaKine's a big brand, but I never expected just how positive a reaction there would have been.
I mean, that sort of fits with the current model, right? Every big brand sort of has its own accessory brand tied to it now. That seems to be the way moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's an efficient business model. If you're selling your products to a store, they need all these products. They don't want to have to deal with several different distributions. They already deal with different distributions for different brands. If every retail store had to deal with a harness distribution, a kite distribution, a board distribution, I mean, they'd be doing paperwork all day. It'd be crazy. So, and obviously, we want to make sure that, when we're developing products, we have an entire ecosystem we're testing with, and that we're keeping in mind that, so we're not just innovating on a spreader bar or a bar and not thinking about, hey, well, how can the spreader bar be better to be compatible with this? What are some maybe other accessories for boards and harnesses and kites that DaKine could potentially get into that are universal, that go across brands as well. So it was really a perfect opportunity for us.
I mean, you mentioned business models then. You've actually got a wealth of business knowledge from outside of water sports. How easy was that apply to your current role?
I don't know about wealth. I would say I had a lot of luck in my life and in my short life. And so I went from college, grad school. I studied education and education policy, got certified to teach, and somehow found myself in a position where I started a education software company in 2011. It's hard to think back now. 2011 started.
10 years, man.
Yeah, it goes by really quick. And so we started 10 years ago, and then we sold it. We ran the company, grew it to a decent size. We raised capital from venture capital funds, angel investors, and really that success was driven. And I have a lot to give back to the kiteboarding community. That company, Nutmeg Education, it was called, would not have been successful if it wasn't for my connections in the kiteboarding world. Everyone in the industry, I mean, honestly, I can't even begin to name the number of people. And if I started naming one or two, I'd be not being fair to all the people that help. So I'm just going to say the entire industry, from investors who just love kiteboarding to people who work in the industry that just had a lot of knowledge and connected me to a lot of great resources. So I entirely give a credit to that success from a great team that I was able to hire and the network I developed from kiteboarding.
Now you're mentioning team and family there, and yet it's a reoccurring thing. Mate, how closely do you work with the team on the direction of the brand?
They've been running Kent has been with the distribution since the beginning and far beyond the beginning of Cabrinha. He's been working with the Neil Pride Group for a long time, and we have a great team in Maui that have been designing these products. We didn't really have any major employee shift. I think we just empowered all the employees and moved them up a level and removed a lot of the bureaucracy with a bigger organization that was with the former owners. I try not to step on their toes. I mean, they're a well-oiled machine that really hasn't been given the gas they need to move forward fast enough. For me, I'm just making sure that they're continue to be well fueled and have the support they need. So I definitely do tinker a little bit with the gear, and I try to give my input when I can, because I've been doing this for a long time too. But I trust them as experts in what they do, and they know I like to give my opinion. But anytime someone says, "Jon, this is what I really think," I say, "Okay, then we're going to go with that." There's no way I'm ever going to kind of say, "No, we're definitely going this route," when people in our group have said, "No, this is what I firmly believe," and they know that about me by now. So it's a pretty good relationship where they know that they can say no or take some input and say, "Okay, Jon, but have you thought about this?" And most of the time it's, "Oh no, I didn't think about that." There's a lot to learn. It's jumping into these into the depths of the brand. It's amazing the intricacies and the complications with product development. And I have a lot of respect for not just our brand, but all the brands who've had to do it over the years behind the scene and probably haven't gotten the credit they deserve for being able to accomplish so much in a relatively small industry.
Yeah, that sort of leads into my next question. I want to talk about a product cycle from sort of that, conceptual idea phase to working with designers into bringing in the writers. How does that sort of work with you guys now?
Well, I would say because there are less cooks in the kitchen from a higher bureaucratic level that don't really necessarily participate in sports, we're able to now open the doors a bit more up to working with our team writers and other people who, frankly, at some point you just don't have time to get input.
Sure.
right? When you have 20 cooks in the kitchen already, and how do you add one or two more, even if they're the best of the best? So, I think now we've streamlined that process quite a bit. I think, if you asked some of our team guys, they would say that they're much more involved now in testing and design and giving their input. But, it's definitely, I would say, for me, the most surprising part is the gap between a conceptual idea and the amount of time it takes to test and execute on that idea, and also make this, it's not just getting the idea accomplished, like our foils, but, we didn't spend nearly as much time in the thought process and the design as we did in making sure that they're really high quality products, making sure that the factories are developing strong, stable, consistent products is a huge amount of work. The quality control is honestly a overwhelming task, and especially for a bigger company in the industry, we have a reputation to uphold, and we want to make sure every one of our products can stand the test of time and is durable. So, and no company is perfect, and certainly, Cabrinha is not perfect, but the amount of work that goes into providing the quality that we have is pretty outstanding. It's the product team, led by our product manager Lars, and our brand manager Dave Hasselow. These guys are really not given any credit that they deserve, and so I'll give them a little plug now, because I can't tell you how much we appreciate them.
If you look at how far kites have come over the last 25 years, and foils have been around, let's say, sort of the last 5, 6, 7 years, where do you see foils over the next 10 years going?
That's a really great question. I think, honestly, has there been a huge evolution of foils in the last year? Yes. I wonder how far it's going to go as far as foil design at this point. I would like to see it become a bit more affordable. Foils are very expensive. I do think with these new higher aspect wings, we're starting to see a bit more versatility in them and range, just like we saw with the bow kites when they first came out. Instead of having, I remember being a team rider in 2004, you'd have at least 5 or 6 kites that you travel with. And then all of a sudden it turned into just 3 kites that you travel with, maybe 4. And then most of the public only need 2 kites these days. I see that happening a bit with these foils. So I think versatility, being like what we tried to accomplish with the Cross Series wing, that you could use them for multiple sports, that they had the size to perform light winds, but also the speed to handle more extreme conditions. So that's what I'd like to see. I think, the brands have done a really incredible job bringing them up to a very high level very quickly. So there's definitely more room to grow, but I think we've seen a big jump already. And I don't know if we're going to see as dramatic of an improvement in the next year or two.
Last question. Tell us about your ideal day and ideal setup.
Ideal day. So this is going to be a little more complicated than you were expecting. Okay. Because
that's good. We have time.
I have a bit of a rule. I try not to go from a hydrofoil to a surfboard, or any other board, because when you go from a hydrofoil board to a surfboard, it feels really slow all of a sudden, right? It feels like unbelievable drag. So this is going to be a bit weird, but I would say my ideal session would be starting in the morning on a surfboard, chest ahead, high waves, side shore, maybe 20 to 25. So I'd be on a, roughly an 8 meter. I love 7 and 8 meters are my bread and butter. I absolutely love those kites. And then the wind, dying out a little bit in the afternoon, and jumping on a foil with a wing, 15 to 20 on like a 5 meter wing and a foil. Those two things for me are that it doesn't really get much better than that.
You're not asking for much.
No, not much. Just the perfect day with 2, absolutely ideal conditions. But it's funny. We get that here. I would say at least 1 or 2 days every 2 weeks. So, especially this time of the year in Florida, winter, spring in Florida is pretty amazing. So we don't get it every day. Like, it's not Maui, it's not Tarifa and other, amazing spots with wind, 5, 6 days a week. But, when it's good here, it's really good here.
Awesome. Well, Jon, thank you very much. That was really interesting. Again, thank you very much for your time.
No, thanks for having me. Always happy to come back.